a listener production.
Hey, it's Antoinette Lattouf. This is the Weekend Briefing, and it's where we take a break from the headlines, we hit pause, and instead I sit down and zoom in on someone who's making waves. And I think it's fair to say that murder is a lot of people's guilty pleasure. So from Silent Witness to CSI and more recently to the mushroom trials, we've been binging crime for years. But how close is TV drama to the real thing? Well, few know better than Dr. Liz Porter. She's an award-winning journalist. She's a true crime author and now the new host of the podcast Crime Insiders Forensics. She's got a PhD on Victoria Police's Forensic Lab and 3 books behind her. Liz has also spent her career showing how science solves the toughest cases. Today we talk about the real CSI, the messy, fascinating world, sometimes boring world, where forensics convicts the guilty and clears the innocent. And later it's the Weekend List with Helen Smith. It's your guide on what to watch and see and eat and do and everything in between. But first, Dr. Liz Porter. Liz Porter, welcome to the Weekend Briefing.
Thank you very much, Antoinette.
I am so excited about this chat because as a fellow journalist, I am looking at your career and thinking, I've never seen a trajectory quite like this. So I want to start at the very beginning. When did you know you wanted to get into journalism? Because I want to start there. And then we're going to get into how you are a forensics storytelling expert, because it's an unlikely leap.
Well, at the beginning, I was at university and wanting to be a journalist, but not knowing how. And my only outlet was reading endlessly magazine articles, which I suppose helped me to internalise the form without ever actually being taught. And then I ended up working in Hong Kong, teaching English, again, desperately wanting to be a journalist and having friends, always blokes actually, who were working for the newspapers there. I did ring up the Hong Kong Standard once and ask for a job as a sub-editor, but they said no. I later found out they didn't actually employ women. This was 1979. So I thought, okay, what can I write? So I took a job in a girly bar in Hong Kong for 3 weeks, and then I rang them up and said, do you take freelance stories? And they said, yes. And I told them what I wanted to write about, and they said, oh, come in. So I came into the office and told them I wanted to write a feminist perspective on being a bar girl. And they said, fine. And they said, when can you have it done by? And I said, tomorrow. So I went home because I knew nothing, and I went home and I stayed up all night and typed it out with 2 fingers. And they published it the next Sunday.
So this is the late 70s and obviously the industry is very male-dominated. You get published and then you find yourself writing for what would then become quite an iconic women's magazine, Clio.
Yes, when I came back to Australia, got a job on Clio for a year, and that was also extraordinary.
At what point did you start to veer off, writing about women's issues to writing about sort of general crime to then really specialising in crime and forensics?
After a year at Clio, I worked for the Sunday Telegraph and the Daily Mirror, where I did a teeny bit of police rounds. But basically, my first ever forensic science associated story that I wrote was in 1989 when I was working for the Melbourne Sunday Age. And at that point, our first DNA-associated conviction had been recorded. I wasn't covering that, but I was interested in the lab where that work had been done. So I simply rang up the Victoria Police Forensic Science Lab and said, can I come out and have a look at what you're doing and write about it? And this is an absolutely unthinkable thing in today's climate.
Yeah.
But back then, in 1989, I don't think I even went through police media, if that is...
That's wild.
Can be imagined.
That is wild.
That is absolutely wild. I'm sitting there looking at a whiteboard on which they have written their case numbers, what the backlog is. I'm asking them about the backlog. They're being completely open with me, or the director of the lab was, who was a very open guy. He wasn't a police officer, he was a scientist. And so I just wandered around asking questions and wrote a general feature specialising or focusing on two or three of the scientists there.
You then went on to do a PhD on Victoria Police Forensics, who at the time were leaders in this area.
That's right. Well, over the years I had written 3 books about forensic science and looking at the way that forensic science is used to solve cases. I had done some of them when I was working at the Sunday Age, but then I left full-time employment in 2009 when I wrote the second and the third book. Because of my contact with the scientists, I knew what a great story the lab was, and I also knew that nobody knew that story. Even defence lawyers who you'd think would know, when you mentioned forensic scientists, they always thought I was talking about the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, which is where the forensic pathologists hang out, the body scientists, and that's an independent body associated with the coroner's court. But the police lab, where they do all the stuff that's on CSI, the DNA analysis, the looking at glass fragments on the road, that's where all that is done. And I knew what a great story it was, and I knew that they weren't telling it, and I wanted to be the person to tell that story.
I dare say you were ahead of your times, Liz, because with CSI and the true crime fascination across all mediums, you were chronicling well before this became something that everybody was able to access and understand. Is that fair to say?
The second major forensic science associated story I wrote was in 1998, and at that point CSI hadn't started. CSI started in the year 2000, but Silent Witness was already going, and a show called McCallum, which was about a British forensic pathologist and starring the actor John Hannah. And I was watching that, and I had that just average person kind of question in my head. Is it really like that? You're watching the forensic pathologists standing over the table and you hear the crackle of their plastic aprons and they're talking about their love lives. And you think, I wonder. So I rang up.
Hovering over a dead body.
Exactly. Yeah. So I rang up the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine and said, can I come and have a look at what you're doing? And they said yes. They were incredibly welcoming. And Stephen Cordner, who was then the head of it, actually lined up 14 people for me to speak to. And I spent 3 days there. I watched an autopsy, which would be unheard of these days, but this was 1998. Things were very different then in terms of openness.
Why would it be unheard of now to watch an autopsy? You don't think a journalist would get access now?
No, well, David Ranson, who was my guide in that piece, he was the deputy head of the institute at the time, and he's a very well-known advisor these days on forensic shows and things. And I was interviewing him recently on our podcast, the Crime Insiders podcast, and I reminded him about the autopsy, and he said, oh, we'd never do that these days. And I'm thinking it would probably be a privacy concern because, you know, theoretical concerns about privacy are very big these days.
Yeah.
And I watched the autopsy of a man whose name I didn't know. I described it. All I knew was he was an elderly man who had died of some possibly heart-associated condition, but I'm sure it would be that.
Yeah, sure. We are going to get to Crime Insiders, the podcast that you are now hosting, which is part of the listener family, in just a moment. Before we do, when we hear about a DNA-led conviction, you usually have, police commissioners or politicians fronting it. Do you think that forensic scientists and the work that forensic scientists do doesn't get due credit?
Oh, absolutely. And this was the whole idea behind doing my PhD, because I've always regarded the forensic scientists as the heroes in these situations. They are the ones with this infinite patience to examine the evidence, and it's often their work that's crucial to these convictions that the police boast about. But there are two reasons, I think, why police keep the forensic scientists in the background. One of them, I think, is probably the less admirable one of just it's all about us, and that's what they're like. The second reason is wanting to protect what they would call their methodology. They don't want, as they would say, the crims to know what they know. But having said that, it's all out there on the internet, so it's pretty much that horse has bolted.
And true crime has gone from, niche interest to cultural juggernaut. Have you seen the public appetite for all the gory details change over the course of your career?
Oh, absolutely, but it's just intensified. And that's why I always feel kind of sad for my goody-goody detectives and forensic investigators who are the ones that do the serious work. But I often find that the appetite of the people in the audience is for the crime writer sitting next to me who will tell them about the actual criminal. They all want to know about, this is some years ago, about Carl and Roberta.
Yes.
They don't want to know about these anonymous forensic scientists.
I just want you to describe that empathy that you have, you're saying, with the police and the forensic scientists. Because do you think it's about the victims and the perpetrators, not about the work that they're doing?
That's right. And I think, at least these days there is an interest in victims as well as perpetrators.
That's right. For a long time it was just the perpetrators, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But look at the whole, crazy mushroom lady phenomenon. It's all about fascination with the evil of the perpetrator. And whereas I see the virtues of the forensic scientists, which are, scientific talent, but patience and persistence are the two key things. And I consider those qualities to be truly heroic. Someone who has their back bent over a microscope for sometimes 3 or 4 months every day. Incredible tolerance for boredom. They're looking at fragments of glass, looking for traces of bullets or chemicals which show that there's been gunshot present, and literally 3 months over a microscope. Or my absolute hero is a Adelaide forensic investigator who nobody has heard of. His name is Paul Sheldon, who's spent about 4 months opening cans with different can openers, photographing the marks that were made on the tiny bits of metal, identifying the sequences so he could match them to tiny pieces of metal found at a bomb blast zone, because in one of those deadly love triangles, which is the story that would have captivated most writers, a man and a woman had plotted to blow up the woman's ex, and they succeeded in killing him. And debris from the bomb was spread over 3 or 4 houses, and Paul Sheldon picked up all the little bits of paper and cardboard and metal, reassembled the bomb, figured out what it had been made of, and then realised that a can opener had been used because there were little marks on pieces of metal.
Oh, wow. So behind every love triangle explosion murder, there's a forensic pathologist or scientist opening up can after can with a can opener to try and figure out what happened.
Well, in this case, yes, because he figured out that the bomb was made of an Australia Post box, cardboard box, a can, batteries and some explosive material. But there was a can opener in the kitchen of the father of one of the suspects, and he wanted to know, was this the killer can opener?
Oh, do we know how many cans he had to open to get to the bottom of it to match?
It was less the cans than he had 14 different can openers and a lot of cans. But the key thing was the 60,000 photographs he took. When this is 1993, and there was maybe now there's a computer program to do this. He did it by eye. He spent 3 or 4 months doing it. And I said to him, oh, crikey, how did you cope with that? And he said, oh, well, people say I'm a bit anal.
Oh, yeah, just a tad, but we're grateful for is it Paul? We're grateful for the Pauls of this world.
Exactly.
In one of your books, Crime Scene Asia, you write about the Bali nightclub bombing, which we're all familiar with. And what role did forensic science play in proving what actually happened there?
Absolutely crucial. David Royds, another one of my personal heroes, and I was very cross on his behalf when a television series was finally made about that. His character played a very small role because he was crucial. He was the one who first identified that a suicide bomber had been involved. He's walked into one of the two crime scenes and looked at the ceiling and saw the blood and realised that that was his theory, which was a theory that was being hosed down by everybody at the time because nobody wanted to think about the fact that Jemaah Islamiyah was already active in the area at the time. And he then uncovered crucial bits of the bomb and examined them and discovered the crucial ingredients. I mean, there were other terrific forensic scientists as well, including some really good Indonesian scientists who examined the engine of one of the vehicles associated. But yeah, forensics was crucial.
And across your 3 books, obviously, you've covered different jurisdictions, different countries, different cases, different methodology. Is there one particular case that still rattles around in your head late at night, or is there one that still gets you wondering what actually happened?
Well, it's funny. I hate to disappoint you like that because I only deal in the cases that have been solved, you see. And that's the difference between me and the whole kind of true crime boom, which is my incredible knack of not being part of the zeitgeist, because what people who listen to podcasts often really love is the unsolved crime. Because they can play amateur detective, they can theorise, or in the case of the mushroom lady, amateur psychiatrist. In my cases, I choose only the cases that have been solved and the cases that have been solved by forensics, which means we're looking at really tiny minority of cases. They are actually quite hard to find.
Because most don't get solved. Is that what you're suggesting? Like most don't get solved?
Most of they get solved because criminals are mostly so stupid.
Right. It's like we solved that because you're on the CCTV camera, mate, and we saw you do it.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, there's those a few crimes that are unsolved or maybe the crime's not even discovered because the criminals are so smart. But, on the whole, they are so stupid.
So after decades of closely researching and examining and reporting on forensics, does anything still shock you or does it kind of make you unshockable?
Yes, I sometimes worry about myself in that regard because for my first book, I was looking at all the different specialities in forensics, and one of them is forensic entomology, where scientists look at the insects found on a dead body and see what they can tell them about the progression of insects to a body will tell you hope, how long that individual has been dead, because first come the flies. And this magnificent maternal instinct of these blowflies who are just wanting to feed their babies. And that's why they want to feed on human blood.
The dead body.
Yeah. So anyway, I was doing a bit of research because I was about to interview a wonderful woman called Melanie Archer, who's now a forensic pathologist, but she at the time was working as a forensic entomologist. That was her first speciality. So I was reading a book called A Fly for the Prosecution and written by a guy who was one of the first advisors to CSI because one of the key early characters in CSI was a forensic entomologist. I think he was also a forensic entomologist and a pathologist. Anyway, I remember I was sitting there eating my lunch and reading about flies on dead bodies, and I remember thinking, there's something the matter with you because it wasn't putting me off my lunch.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, this is interesting. And so I think I just have a strong stomach, perhaps.
Yeah. And I wonder, there's a balance between having a strong stomach and I guess getting desensitized, but that's for anybody who works with the dead, essentially.
Well, talking about having a strong stomach, I'm not the one who is going to crime scenes. I am only interviewing scientists who have done that difficult work. And I think of one of the leading forensic scientists at the Victoria Police Lab who is an expert blood spatter person, and he, in many cases, has actually been able to tell detectives what has happened, that something to the untrained eye, it's just an absolute bloodbath of a crime scene, but he can look at it and see which area is cast off blood that might have been shed by the perpetrator, as opposed to the other blood spatters all over the floor or the walls, which are blood shed by the victims. And that's been absolutely crucial. And then the detectives are then able to put that scenario to an accused, and certainly in one case, accused saying, "How did you know that?"
Well, he obsesses over blood. He obsesses over blood and the way it splatters and the way it lands.
In order to figure out what has happened at a crime scene, he can't just go there, take notes, walk away. He has to think about it and review it and obsess about it. And he is highly aware of the psychic cost to himself of that work. But he kept doing it, which is heroic.
You have recently joined the listener family as the host of Crime Insiders Forensics. What do you want listeners to learn about, the real science behind the headlines?
Well, I think I want them to learn all the things that I've been learning over the years, how hard the work is, how exacting it is.
That it doesn't get solved in an hour like on CSI?
That it doesn't get solved in an hour, yes. And as I said, this incredibly heroic quality of patience and persistence that I don't think people realise just how long these kind of examinations take. And as I said, these people, these forensic scientists, are always in the background, and increasingly so, I feel, because as I'm sure that you're aware too as a journalist, Antoinette, bodies like Victoria Police have become over the years increasingly secretive. You don't have the kind of access that you might have had certainly 20 years ago. I'm fortunate in that I made my first forays into the lab at a time when things were a little bit more open. But again, I joined the Australia and New Zealand Forensic Scientists Society at the suggestion of one of the scientists at the lab, just so that I could actually get into the building, because they were being actually very resistant at the time, which was back in 2003. And he said, look, if you become a bit more of a familiar face by going to these meetings, it might make things more easy for you.
It's clear just listening to you that despite how many books you've written and how many different countries you've worked in, that your passion and dedication and commitment to forensics and forensic reporting remains really strong. Oh,
yes, I do find it interesting, and I still like to do things like watch Silent Witness, even though it's completely unrealistic, and I sit there on the sofa scoffing to myself about what they're doing. Or not so much the science of it, but the fact is they're investigating, which scientists don't do. They investigate their scientific questions, but they're not out there sneaking around the suspect's house in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Right. Well, I guess what you bring to listeners is, you can call bullshit when you see it. You're like, oh, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. This is what really happens. This is what it's really like. And this is the incredibly important work forensic plays in helping get us answers.
The main... Well, it's not a problem, but it's a major concern to me is that most of us get our forensic knowledge through fiction.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because the rules of fiction are pretty strict. And I'm very aware of this at the moment because I'm attempting to write a novel with a forensic scientist character. And the sad fact is that most forensic heroes in fiction are actually scientist detectives, not just scientists. And I understand why, but you need to, as a writer of a crime novel, you need your character to be in danger so that the reader cares and turns the page. And you do need them to be engrossed in some kind of mystery. So the challenge is to, in my case, try and make it a mystery in their private life, not a mystery where they're doing a cop's job for them, which is what tends to happen in forensic novels and more so on forensic television shows.
Well, this has been a fascinating chat, and for those who are interested in forensics and don't just want the fiction but want a real insider's look on how it plays out, what the facts are that are sometimes, boring and take a long time to arrive at, they can definitely tune into Crime Insider's Forensics. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Antoinette. It was a pleasure.
That's Dr. Liz Porter, award-winning journalist, true crime author, and now the new host of Crime Insider's Forensics. It is time for the weekend list. It's where Helen Smith and I, we have a think about what we've been getting up to, what we've enjoyed and why, and also why we think you need to know. Helen Smith, what have you got?
My first recommendation is Sweet Bobby, My Catfish Nightmare on Netflix. Now, you might remember the viral, it exploded. It had thousands of downloads and went like chart topping. It was the podcast, the Sweet Bobby podcast, which was Tortoise Media investigation. And it is the same story with the woman at the centre of it, but she's literally talking to camera in this documentary, and it's quite interesting to just meet her and see her and watch her facial expressions and see her explain what it was like to be in this. She was catfished for nearly a decade.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's a very committed catfisher.
Yeah. It's almost unbelievable when you watch it. And I'm not going to give anything away, but they met on Facebook.
Yeah.
He was a real person in real life.
Right.
But obviously someone was hiding behind his profile.
Okay, so she did meet the real person and then somebody pretended to be that person?
She kind of did. She once saw him because they were all from the same community in the same area, and Bobby was from a well-respected family within that community. So there were mutual friends, there were people, it was very intertwined. So it could have seemed like this was the real Bobby. And that's how it gets so complicated.
Okay, so how does this build on or differ or
I think
beat the podcast? Or
I
is
don't
this
know
a
if it
visual?
will beat it.
Okay.
But it rehashes the story. It's the visuals of it though, and seeing her reactions and her talking about it and explaining it. And you're sitting there like, how did you fall for this? How did you
I think
believe
that's
this?
my big question. I mean, how did she without giving it all away?
God, I don't know.
Is there like a hint or something you can share?
It was a different time. It was early 2000s.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I also think there's so many layers of complexity to this story because, she was a woman in her 30s. The pressure on her to get married was really high. There's so many layers to why she would have fell for this. But the desperation of wanting to be in a relationship, it's just wild.
All right. It sounds like you're going to have to watch it to believe it. Okay. Remind us of the name.
It's called Sweet Bobby, My Catfish Nightmare, and it's on Netflix.
And it will be in the show notes as well. Okay. I also have a Netflix recommendation. Look, I'm recommending it. I'm not like entirely love it. I watched it because of the two actors in it who I was drawn to. So it's Black Rabbit. It's a limited series on Netflix, and it's got Jason Bateman, who I adore, and Jude Law, who I used to have a crush on in yesteryear. And so I was like, these are two pretty big names. I want to check it out. And so they're brothers, Jude Law and Jason Bateman, and they bring their charisma to their roles. The background is that they own a joint restaurant and there's a whole bunch of complexities. They owe a lot of people money. So if anybody has watched Bear, which is a very intense, high-pressure kind of restaurant-based series, which did very, very well, it tries to emulate that intensity, but there's other high stakes and drama and layered tension because of the money owed and family relationships. I stayed with it because I really like these two actors and I loved Bear. I love this kind of restaurant intensity. I'm not sure if my loyalty to the actors or my loyalty to the context of a restaurant type show kept me there.
Yeah.
But I would recommend it if you're curious to see, particularly Jude Law. We haven't seen him do anything huge lately, like very significant lately. And if you're just like a Jason Bateman fan like me, I consume anything he's in.
Yeah.
So that's it's a recommendation, with that kind of enthusiasm.
Yeah. Yeah, I take it.
Yeah, because not everything I watch,
We're not going to love everything.
Love everything. But, I was curious enough to keep watching.
That's still good. That's pretty good.
Okay, what's next?
My next recommendation is Olivia Dean's new album. Now she's a 26-year-old English singer-songwriter, and it's called The Art of Loving. And she is one of my favourite artists right now. I actually saw her at Laneway this year in
Sydney.
In Sydney.
Yeah.
And her style is a mix between kind of pop, neo-soul, R&B and jazz. So it's really, she's taken it all. And I love it because some of the songs in it are really poppy, but then some of them are way more jazz style and slower.
I'm going to listen now, not in 2027.
Yes.
And come back to you and be like,
listen now.
Okay.
Well, she's kind of now mainstream, but she was really like indie pop girl. But I'm happy she's becoming mainstream because she deserves it. She's so good. But my favorite song on the album that was only released on the album, not any of the singles that kind of went viral, like Man I Need, but it's called So Easy, and then in brackets, To Fall in Love. It's that poppy, soulful kind of vibe, and it's just so good. And I've been listening to it all week. And yeah, Olivia Dean's new album, The Art of Loving.
Awesome. Okay, my final recommendation. I don't usually, I'm not a big shopper. I don't like to go to the shops, but I have recently, and I have found myself drawn to jewellery which is like gold-plated, but not like Lovisa gold-plated or those Coletta where you call them those fast, not those fast fashion kind of jewellery brands which are everywhere and highly disposable and rusty and whatever. There has been a kind of a shift in the market that I've noticed, probably 2 years too late. You'll correct me soon, Helen. But stuff that is like waterproof, durable, looks pretty much like gold, and you don't just have to wear it as costume jewelry, you can wear it all the time. Yeah. This particular brand is called Arms of Eve. It's founded in 2017. It's an Australian brand. I just really like the craftsmanship. I wear it with some of my actual real gold jewelry. You can't tell the difference. It's affordable. I find it's a good gift. Like it's like a durable and high quality enough gift without being too exy.
Yeah.
Like you can get a nice pair of earrings for $60 or a bangle on sale for $140 as opposed to if it was real gold, it would be several $100s.
Yeah, it'd be so crazy.
But it looks really good and it kind of fills that gap in the market where, because I don't want to keep buying fast fashion crap.
No.
Which I know, ends up in the bin after 3 months. So yeah, Arms of Eve.
Yeah, this is actually, so Mum and I got our evil eyes from there. Like little Italian horn chilies, and we wear them all the time and like months on end, and I'm the same. I wear it everywhere in the shower and stuff, and yeah, it's fine. And it's also like, if you're going to buy cheaper jewelry, you're actually going to probably end up spending more.
Yes. And I will do, having a quick look at the website, I will do a correction. The bracelets cost anywhere between $90 and $120, and that's not on sale. I usually wait till there's 20% off.
Yeah, we love a sale.
Yeah, we do love a sale. And so the cost difference between something at Lovisa, like it really is that midpoint between like Lovisa and Michael Hill jewelry gold bangle.
Michael Hill, oh my God, still happening, is he?
Yeah, Michael Hill's still around. He's rebranded. I don't know what else to say. Prouds. Nana brands. What else is there?
I don't know.
Yeah, but Michael Hill's still around. He's a few dollars up from Lovisa at shopping centres near your grandma. Okay, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed those recommendations. And if you enjoyed this chat with Dr. Liz Porter, please let us know. We read all of the feedback, good or bad. We love to read it, especially the good stuff, especially when you give us 5 stars. Please do that. That is it from me. I will be back in your ears next week with the Weekend Briefing. In the meantime, the headlines, the news and deep dives will be delivered from the team Monday to Friday. I will catch you next weekend.